In a Rome marked by intense political struggles and power games, a man of monastic spirit and a life wholly devoted to prayer was taken from his cloistered seclusion and led, almost by force, to the throne of St. Peter. His name, Leo VII. A pontiff who, unlike many of his predecessors and successors, never aspired to the papacy. In fact, his rise to the highest office in Christendom was the result of inescapable political circumstances. Amidst state-driven marriage alliances, tensions between neighboring kingdoms, and scandalous rumors surrounding his death, the story of Leo VII offers a unique account of how a reserved and discreet man could unexpectedly become a key figure during one of the Church's most delicate historical periods. Here are 10 fascinating facts about Pope Leo VII. 10. Elected under political pressure, Alberic II Pope. In the 10th century, power dynamics in Rome were far more explicit and direct than the diplomatic subtleties that define Vatican politics today. Real control of the Eternal City lay in the hands of Alberic II, a near-absolute ruler who governed Rome as a kind of feudal lord. When the papal throne became vacant, Alberic II sought a pope who would be submissive and free of political ambition. The choice fell on Leo VII, then abbot of the monastery of St. Sixtus, known for his humility and secluded lifestyle. Contemporary accounts suggest the monk tried to refuse the papal dignity, but the political pressure left him with no such freedom. Thus, Leo VII was elevated to the papacy under direct imposition from secular authority. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do so now so you don't miss any interesting facts. 9. A reluctant pope, the monk who preferred solitude over the apostolic palace. Leo VII took on the papacy with clear reluctance. He was deeply devout and averse to political disputes. His greatest desire was to remain in his monastic retreat, devoted to prayer and spiritual service. Nonetheless, obeying Alberic II's command, the new pontiff accepted his mission with Christian resignation. Throughout his papacy, he sought to maintain the sobriety of his monastic formation, governing the Church with discretion and avoiding direct involvement in the conflicts plaguing Rome. 8. Diplomatic mediator, the Pope who brought peace to Italy through marriage. Despite his initial reluctance, Leo VII demonstrated great wisdom when needed. One of the major challenges of his papacy was the crisis between Alberic II and Hugh of Provence, King of Italy, which threatened to erupt into open conflict. To avoid war, Leo VII enlisted the mediation of Odo of Cluny, one of the most respected church figures of the time. The outcome was a brilliant diplomatic solution, a marriage between Alberic II and Alda, daughter of King Hugh. This matrimonial alliance brought momentary political stability to the region. 7. Protector of monastic life, the Pope who strengthened the monasteries. Leo VII remained true to his monastic roots. During his pontificate, he focused on strengthening monasteries, especially those connected to the Cluniac reform movement. Through various papal bulls, he granted privileges, lands, and administrative autonomy to monastic communities. The Pope firmly believed that monasteries represented the spiritual soul of Europe and would, in time, become the centers of a much-needed moral reform within the Church. While many popes of his era engaged in intrigue and political disputes, Leo VII dedicated himself to the protection and growth of monastic life. 6. Reformer of the German clergy, a pontiff with a vision beyond the Alps. Though a man of modest and reserved demeanor, Leo VII was not indifferent to problems affecting the clergy outside Italy. In German territories, the Church was facing serious moral disorder, clerical marriages, simony, and practices incompatible with the priesthood were widespread. To address this crisis, Leo VII appointed Archbishop Frederick of Mainz as his apostolic vicar, granting him full authority to implement reforms among the German clergy. Frederick carried out his mission with rigor, removing corrupt prelates, enforcing clerical celibacy, and restoring discipline among priests. This decision showed that, despite his aversion to conflict, Leo VII knew how to act decisively when the spiritual well-being of the Church was at stake. 5. Ambiguous position toward the Jews. Between tolerance and religious pressure. Pope Leo VII's pontificate took place during a time of great tension between Christians and Jews in Western Europe. In a climate marked by hostility, the Pope enacted measures that, from a modern perspective, appear as a paradoxical mix of progress and regression. On one hand, Leo VII prohibited the forced conversion of Jews to Christianity, an action that, for the standards of the 10th century, reflected a certain respect for freedom of conscience. This decision stood in contrast to the stance of other church leaders of the time, who often tolerated or even encouraged conversions under duress. However, at the same time, the Pope authorized the expulsion of Jews who, even when invited, refused to convert to Christianity voluntarily. In this way, the tolerance he displayed had severe limitations, ultimately offering a forced choice between baptism or exile. 4. Efforts to strengthen clerical celibacy, a call to purity and ecclesiastical discipline. One of Leo VII's central concerns was the moral state of the clergy, especially regarding the observance of celibacy. At the time, it was common to find priests living in conjugal relationships, some even with children, and bishops who were often complicit in these practices. Determined to restore ecclesiastical discipline, Leo VII strongly advocated for clerical chastity. To implement these reforms, he granted broad authority to more rigorous prelates, such as Archbishop Frederick of Mainz, previously noted for his decisive role in Germany. In addition, the Pope firmly combated superstitious practices and magical elements that had crept into the liturgy and pastoral life of some clergymen. Divination, sorcery, and rituals inconsistent with Christian doctrine were condemned. In an era when punitive measures were the primary means of correction, Leo VII resorted to canonical penalties, including the threat of excommunication, as tools to discipline the clergy and restore priestly dignity. 3. Reconstruction of a monastery outside Rome's walls. A pope who prioritized spiritual retreat. True to his monastic roots, Leo VII showed great appreciation for a life of prayer and contemplation. During his brief pontificate, he ordered the rebuilding of a monastery near the Basilica of St. Paul, located outside the city walls of Rome. This initiative aimed to provide monks with an environment more conducive to spiritual retreat, far from the political and social unrest of the city. This gesture reflects not only the Pope's personal piety, but also his concern for preserving the authenticity of religious life. For Leo VII, monastic solitude was not sterile isolation but a necessary condition for deep spiritual development and the inner renewal of the Church. 2. Controversial circumstances surrounding his death. Between history and legend. Leo VII died on July 13, 939, after a little more than 3 years as the head of the See of Peter. He was buried with proper honors in the Vatican Basilica, as tradition required for Roman pontiffs. However, as often happens with historical figures, especially those in high positions of power, his death became the subject of speculation. Some later chronicles, lacking documentary rigor, suggested that the Pope died under scandalous circumstances, during an alleged intimate encounter. These accounts, unsupported by credible contemporary sources, lack historical validation and are generally regarded as products of popular legend and medieval folklore. Regardless of the apocryphal versions, Leo VII's death marked the end of a brief but not insignificant papacy. 1. A brief papacy with moral impact. The legacy of Leo VII. Leo VII's time as leader of the Church was short, from 936 to 939, but his legacy is worthy of note. Though elevated to the papacy due to political pressures and against his own will, the pontiff conducted himself with dignity, discretion, and a profound sense of spiritual responsibility. His most notable achievements include strengthening monastic life, implementing moral reforms among the clergy, especially in Germany, bringing peace to Rome through skillful diplomacy, and striving to preserve the purity of the faith. Leo VII stands as an example of an ecclesiastical leader who, despite assuming the papacy under circumstances beyond his control, fulfilled his mission with sobriety and pastoral dedication. He left behind a testimony of faithfulness to monastic vocation amidst the political complexities of his time. And that brings us to the end of another episode in the series on popes named Leo. Had you heard the story of Pope Leo VII before? See you in the next story.